Good morning. My name is Eli. I'm the student pastor here at LifeBridge, and I just want to start off by sharing a bunch of quotes with you. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Fear is pain arising from the anticipation of evil. In time, we hate that which we often fear. A man can only be brave when he's afraid, and there's no need to fear. Underdog is here. There are a ton of writings and speeches and quotes and Instagram posts, all the things about fear. Fear is the most common, universal human experience. Everyone goes through it. Yet the most common command, the most popular command throughout the entire Bible, when we see it given to every kind of person, be it from an ordinary person to a ruler, is fear not. Sometimes it's be not afraid, or depending on translations, do not fear. But we see it all throughout the Bible. And whether it's being given to a group of shepherds or warriors or fishermen, the command is not to ignore the situation. It's to shift your focus from the circumstance towards the amazing and powerful presence of God. God does not say that their situations aren't scary, but he is bigger than the situation. And so our series this whole next couple weeks is Fear Not. And this series will journey chronologically throughout the Bible, exploring some of the most significant moments where God steps in and says, do not fear or do not be afraid. Each week we'll examine the life of someone who has a very real fear in a very scary situation, and we'll see why God calls them to trust him over the situation. And I thought I'd just start off by just sharing something. I'm afraid of spiders. Anyone else a spider person, not afraid, don't like spiders? Anyone with me on the fear of spiders people? Cool. How about snakes? Anyone afraid of snakes? Okay, that was a lot more. I love snakes. I think they're awesome. But I am like the bug guy in our house. If there's a bug, I got it. I'll take care of it. Maybe not the most brave way you'll see me take care of something, but I'll take care of the bug eventually. Unless it's a spider. And then I'm a really mature leader, and I delegate that responsibility to my wife, and she does great with spiders. Spiders freak me out. I don't like them. Just keep them away. And there's nothing really spiritual in that. I just wanted to get off my chest. I hate spiders, and I feel good about this. I think I can take a deep breath now. You know something about me. Oh man, but we all do have fears. We all have something. And sometimes there are things you don't want to encounter, like snakes or spiders. Or if you're my oldest brother, butterflies. And I just want to roast him anytime I can. He is terrified of butterflies. He says they have no natural predators. He has not seen them around birds. But it's fine. Some kinds of fears are like that. You don't encounter them. They're potential dangers. Sometimes fears are emotional. But no matter what kind of fear it is, all fears live in the future. I'm not afraid of something in the past. I'm afraid of the future situation. Maybe current, but mostly future situation. Maybe that fear is encountering that thing again. Maybe that fear is failing or a situation not going the way we want it to. Maybe that fear is something we tried to hide or we're insecure about in our lives coming to light and people seeing it. But those fears often show up as worry. I'm afraid of an outcome. I'm afraid of a situation. And so it plays out like I am terrified of the future. I'm worried about tomorrow. And when you have that kind of worry and fear about tomorrow, it leads to big questions like this. Will my marriage make it? Will my kids follow Jesus? Will the diagnosis get worse? Will I ever get married? Will we ever have enough? Will God actually do what he promised? We fear what tomorrow may bring or may not bring. And when we worry and we panic, we try to take control of things that are outside of our own control. And our story today is all about this idea. And since we're going through this series chronologically, we're going to be starting off in the very first book in the Bible, Genesis. We're in Genesis chapter 15, verse 1, for anyone who wants to get there. And the book of Genesis is full of amazing narratives, people's lives and situations that are interesting and exciting, and this person's story is very interesting. Today we're looking at a person named Abram. And you might know him as Abraham, who had many sons, and many sons had father Abraham. But at this point, God has not given him the new name or the many sons, and so he's Abram. And so verse 1 of chapter 15 in Genesis, we see this. Sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great. But Abram replied, O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you have not given me Any children, Eleazar of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You have given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir." Then the Lord said to him, "No, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir. Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, "Look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have." And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. There's a lot to break down in this. And so as we begin this series, I want to step in and focus on verse 1, which feels very important for our Fear Not series. Abram has a vision from God, and God speaks to him during it. And one of the two ways that we're going to be interacting with God most of this way is either visions or a physical manifestation when God appears. Those physical manifestations are called theophanies. And spoiler alert, that's like the entire series. It's either theophanies or visions. Because when God's presence is visible, when it's audible, when it's tangible, everyone kind of loses their minds. It is terrifying. Because when you step into the visible, powerful presence of God, it is shocking to our systems. So when God says, "Do not be afraid," it's a, "Hey, calm down," most of the time. It's a, "Hey, don't worry. I know this is kind of crazy. Don't freak out." But this fear not is doing more than that in this chapter. It's doing more than just bringing Abram out of the fear in the moment of God addressing him. It's also addressing the fear of his heart. 3 chapters back in Genesis 12, God had promised Abram many descendants. He had promised this before. In Genesis 12, verse 2, it says, "I will make you into a great nation." God was promising Israel to Abram years and years before this. So there's years and years to where we are now in chapter 15. And so for Abram, time seems to be running out. And his question is, will God deliver? Every day, every week, every month, and the years that have passed by, it becomes harder and harder to believe in the promise. He and his wife are older in age, and they're getting older by the second. This is the agony of the waiting room. It's that cliche in every dramatic TV show where the waiting room scene happens, where someone has to go to the hospital, and they're all worried about it, and the doctors say, "You can't go back there," and they're just stuck. And to wait on the doctors to do their job, to trust the doctors. And the passage of time in the waiting room is harder. It seems like time stops here. Because every second you spend in the waiting room is another second where control is out of your hands. When the fate and future become more uncertain, you become less hopeful, and nothing feels like relief. If you ask me outside of a hospital, do I trust the doctors? Do I think they have really good surgeons? I most likely say, yeah, they have really great people in there. I'm sure they're awesome, really great surgeons, really cool, whatever. But then I have to go in. And now that you have to live out that trust, belief in them becomes tested and strained. And so Abram and Sarah are in that place. They are stuck in the waiting room. And as cliche as it is, this is something we can all relate to. We make plans, we have dreams, we have hopes and visions of like, here's how my life is going to work out, and here's how God is going to step in. And you go, "Okay, God, I've made the plan. Here you are. This is your time. Right now, God, come on. I made a little window for you. It's in my Google Calendar. Come on." And that doesn't happen sometimes because we think, man, I don't want to wait any longer. So God, clearly you want to step into the situation. We think God is late to the party. I have this moment where God needs to act, and it feels like this time is expiring. I have a million examples in my own life when I was expecting God to do something, and it felt like the time had come and then gone, and God missed his chance. I was like, "God, I really planned something cool for you over here. Like, you missed out, man." Like, that's how sometimes I interact with God. But God would then, if I think it's going to happen right here, God takes care of it way down the timeline down here. And it's an amazing thing that if God had taken care of it here, it would have been so much worse. If I was right and God listened to me, the situation would have been so much worse. But when God, in his perfect timing, when I have to wait for him, this is where it is good. Abram and Sarah are stuck in the agony of the waiting room. Fear, worry, doubt, anxiety, these are all the things that are building up in Abram. And fear grows when God's promises seem delayed. But do not be afraid, God says. When God makes a promise, he keeps it. Delay often feels like denial, but God is rarely early. He's never late. And I don't want to spend a lot of time today going into the instant gratification society that we live in or the impatience of recent generations, because I think if you look at Genesis 15, what we see is that the fear and worry of God not acting and delivering when we want him to is not new. A faithful man like Abram had fear rising in him. God said it would happen, and yet it's becoming more and more impossible by the day. And this kind of moment is really common when we panic, and fear takes over, our timeline starts to fall apart, and we go, God, like, you're missing out on what you're supposed to do. God, like, this is where you're supposed to step in, God. I've read every story. I know all the cliches. I know that this is when the hero last second defuses the bomb. Like, they take care of all the situations in my life. Come on, God, step in. When I was a kid, I would play basketball, and I wasn't really good at it. But the thing you do as a boy in the middle school playing basketball is you envision that you're winning the championship game. That's just what you do. And it has to be a buzzer beater. It has to be the last second shot. Like, you have to have the game on your shoulders, and you dribble and then shoot, and then I go like, oh, the game's over in 3, 2, and I shoot, and I miss because I'm not good at basketball. And then I'm like, oh, there's actually a foul on the play. Let's keep going, foul on the course, keep going, and then I redo the buzzer until I make it, and I feel like I've won the championship game. That's how it would go for me. Now I'm good at basketball. I played against middle schoolers. I feel really good about it. And so we create buzzer beater situations for God. We go, okay, God, the window is closing. Come on, do a miracle right here. 3, 2, 1.5, 1, 0.9, 0. Come on, God, right now, come on. Like, we're doing that whole thing to God. Like, come on, the time's passing by. And that's just not how it works. We don't get to dictate the timeline. We get to trust God's. And pride is one of the sneakiest temptations here, because it feels great. Like, it feels right to say, hey, God, I'm expecting you to do something here. Like, God, I'm giving you space to do a miracle. I'm creating a space for everyone to see how awesome you are. So, God, I have this timeline. Here's where I need you to step in, because no one expects it to happen right here. And it's pride, because we're saying, God, I want you to step in where I need you to step in, where I think you should step in. We say, God, I have the plan, follow along. It's praying to God and saying, God, do your will my way. Do your will on my timeline. Do your will the way I want you to. Do your will and give me all the things I really want around that. It's do your will, but our heart and hope is that his will is actually just going to line up with ours. And it's pride. And waiting and having fear of tomorrow, it doesn't feel like pride, but when we think we have control or God should do and jump when we say jump, then we have a pride issue. But trusting in God, having faith in him, is a pride killer. It is all about submission and surrender. Abram is in a conversation with God. And while it sounds like Abram has lost hope or trust in God, he's upset with God, that's kind of a mistranslation, at least on my end when I read it. I used a different translation to read it again, and I think it makes it a little bit clearer in verse 2. So God has promised him all these great things, and then verse 2 responds to God saying, O sovereign Lord, what will you give me since I am childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Sovereign Lord is a divine title. It is Adonai Yahweh. That supreme authority, ownership, and majesty is his. Abram is approaching this response to God with a recognition of God's power, but most importantly, he's recognizing God's control. The Lord who's over all things, who's capable of all things, he's coming in humble. He's coming in with no pride, saying, this is not my timeline, God. I'm trusting you, and where are we in the plan? The Lord is over all things. Abram is saying that, well, it's great that God has provided. And verse 1 says, you'll be my shield, and you'll provide me plenty. That's awesome. I trust and I believe in that, but it does not matter what the reward is, because Abram knows that God's not finished with his promise. In fact, he says, there's a servant in my house, Eliezer of Damascus, and I'm not going to get into the wordplay that exists in the name Eliezer or Damascus. Just know it's really cool, but it's really lame if I try to spend like 20 minutes talking about it. But the Hebrew there is amazing. And the heart here of Abram is that he has a servant of his own. And even if he were to go through the process of adopting the servant, it would not be fulfillment of the promise. So he knows that God's not done. And verse 1 is an amazing thing to hear from God. I'm your shield. I will protect you and give you security. I will give you plenty. I will, triple, quadruple your assets. Like anything you want, it is yours. How often do we ask this prayer? God, please protect me and my family. God, please bless us and continue to bless us. We ask this prayer all the time, and Abram gets it in verse 1, and it seems like in verse 2, Abram's like, well, I don't care about that. But Abram is not ungrateful. He just knows that God's not finished. There was a promise made years and years ago, and he's still holding on and waiting and trusting in that promise. And so do not hear in verse 2, okay, that's great, God, but what have you done for me lately? Instead here, I have not forgotten that you have work that you're still doing, and I trust in this. Where are we in the process? If Abram did not have faith, if he lacked faith, he would see verse 1 as a consolation prize. Hey, I know I promised you that you would do a great nation through you, but instead I'm just going to give you a bunch of resources, and I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'm going to make sure you and your life is amazing. And that is not what Abram is worried about. It's not his concern. Not that it's not amazing to hear, but he knows what God's going to do through the promise is even greater. And that's why God is able to go in verse 3 and 4 and show him and count the stars and reaffirm this promise, because Abram has faith that this promise is going to happen. And God said, I haven't forgotten. In fact, it's greater than you even knew beforehand. And so when we say that we have faith, we often draw the finish line at believing in God's existence. Like I'm a faith kind of person. Like I have faith, and it means God's real. Check the box. Maybe go as far as say I believe in God, and I believe in Jesus, I believe in the resurrection, I believe all these things. Like I believe all the things. I have faith. Cool, box checked. But faithfulness, a growing and active faith, is more often shown in believing in God's timing and control. And I'm not saying that belief or salvation is set in what we do or our actions. Faith is not determined by our actions, but our hearts. And so faith is who we trust, and then faithfulness is how we trust. Faithfulness is a life that is not full of fear, because faithfulness clings to God. It shifts focus from the scary situation in front of us and looks to God because we know he's going to take care of it. It looks to God because we know he's in control. We try not to cling to our own plans, but we cling to God's will. Our own plans, they're not trustworthy. They're going to change, they're going to adjust. Other people interact with our plans and ruin them, and that's the most frustrating thing ever, and it makes us all upset when our plans don't happen, because we're trying to hold on to what we think is right and what we think should happen. But God, in his supreme authority, Adonai Yahweh, he is trustworthy. In fact, I want to talk this a moment of pride. I work with middle school and high school students, and if you want to have pride, play basketball or any kind of sport against a middle schooler, and you will feel like LeBron. Like, it is the coolest moment ever when I get to dunk on a middle school boy, and I'm like, haha, and then I'm like, I would have cried in 6th grade if that happened to me. It's fine. It is amazing to happen. We have students tonight, please bring your middle schoolers. I won't do that. Is the things of pride. I have moments where I really struggle with it. I think I'm the best. My son comes up to me and he'll bring anything to me in our house that's broken. And he'll go, Dad, fix? And I'm like, yeah, of course I'll fix this. I can fix anything. I'm Dad. And so I just have this moment where, at home, I can control and fix everything. There's nothing in my house I can't do. And then I interact with God and I think, man, I can do everything. Like, God, you get to jump in what I'm doing. God, you get to see how cool I am. You get to see the plans I'm doing. I made a little bubble for here, God, where I get to go, God's really cool, isn't he? And then go right back into I get to be the cool guy. I have pride that just destroys everything around me if I let it go untamed. Because there's a moment in me that I say, God can do amazing things and I can be the person who gets the spotlight for it. God can do amazing things and I'm the guy who goes, and that's awesome. Let's follow that up with God, round of applause. And I'm the one getting the applause. I have moments where my faith, and I check the box, feels enough. And my faithfulness feels like I'm losing something. I'm giving up, I'm surrendering and submitting, and I don't want to do it. It is so hard to live a life that is faithful. It requires active, and constant supervision. You have to control and tame your heart, control and tame your tongue, control and tame your actions. In fact, the word for faith and belief and faithfulness, they all share the exact same root. And I told you I'm not going to do Hebrew, so that's as far as I'm going to go. But you cannot have biblical faith while remaining completely passive. You can't do it. Just as you can't sustain genuine faithfulness without having an anchored belief in who God is. I believe in God is not the same as I believe that God is going to do something. One is acknowledging existence. If I say God is real, I'm acknowledging that he is real. I acknowledge his existence. If I acknowledge that God is doing something, that he is working, I'm acknowledging presence. I'm acknowledging the active and current and living God. And a faith that acknowledges existence and just existence is one that makes it easier to sleep at night. I'm good. I believe in God. I've checked the box. I can sleep. If I don't make it tomorrow, I'm not worried about it. I'm good. But a faith that acknowledges presence makes it so you can grow towards God. When you spend time in his presence, you cannot help but to be stretched and to challenge and be challenged and to grow. And so the fear not of Genesis 15 is not about Abram thinking God isn't real, or that God wasn't there. They have a relationship. God showing up to Abram in a vision is not actually that shocking to Abram. He trusted in God's existence. The fear not was for Abram to not worry that about God not doing what he said he was going to do. And God's voice was never going to contradict his word. God made a promise. And so when God speaks to Abram now, he is not going to change his mind. His promise was going to come to reality. And they just had to be in the waiting and the struggling and the endurance of agony. The extra years passing, every year going on, Abram's faith had to be tested a little bit more. But Abram knew that God said it would happen, so it was going to happen. In this series, Fear Not, is all about moments when God calls his people to trust him. And this is one of the stories we get this series where we see the immediate benefit of it. In Genesis 15, verse 6, and Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith. Abram was reminded of the promise of a nation to come through him. And now he counts the stars, and he knows that his descendants are going to outnumber these stars. This passage is not the beginning of Abram's faith. It is a moment and a marker along the way. Faith does not start when God delivers. Abram had faith before God made the promise 3 chapters back. Abram has had faith for years. So God did not count Abram righteous because of his newfound faith, or his faith that was gone and now has come back. Abram continued to believe. God counts Abram righteous because Abram had a faith that endured a timeline longer than his own. In the face of fear, worry, and doubt, Abram had a faith that remained strong. We need a faith with a backbone, a faith that does not shrink or dwindle over time, a faith that can endure a timeline longer than we expected. Because faith is not a lack of fear, it's the ability to fix your eyes on the promises of God in spite of it. Abram counted the stars, and he believed in God, and so God counted his faith. The next day, Abram woke up, and spoiler, I'm going to tell you right now, Abram does not have a child the next day. It'd be years still until that promise would be fulfilled. But faith is not about believing that tomorrow will go the way you want. Faith is about believing that God will still be faithful when tomorrow comes. Fear not. Do not be afraid. And so the question I have is, what is a situation tomorrow that you need to trust God in before he delivers? And I think a faith with a backbone, a faith that is full of faithfulness, requires us to do 2 things. It requires us to surrender, and it requires us to believe. And surrendering is not giving up. It is placing control in the right hands. And submission, it feels like an insult, but we do it all the time. I had to surrender control in an airplane. I would love to be the guy who's flying the plane. I'm not the guy. I'm not allowed to do it. They locked the door for a reason. I had to surrender control in the airplane. I talked a lot about this in the first service, but now I'm streaming. I submit to my boss. I surrender and submit to my amazing, wonderful boss every single day because I enjoy gainful employment. I submit to my boss because I trust him. I submit because I think he's a better leader than me. I want to follow underneath him. But when it comes to God, that's where we struggle. And it's often because we approach God as a genie, not Adonai Yahweh. We approach God with confirmation on existence, not surrender to his presence. I believe in you, God, so come on, chop, do the thing I need you to do. Or you said I believe in you and it would all work out, and so I believe in you, God, so come on, do the thing. Fix the situation in my life. Please fix this. Today, I need tomorrow. This has got to happen, God. Which means I'm so glad that God is more patient than me. If I was me and approached God as me, that's bad. Let me rephrase that. If I approached myself, I'm gonna read it as I wrote it because that's too confusing. If I had approached God without submission and demands, the way why I wrote this way? Because there have been so many times I've approached God, without submission and demands, and if I was God, I would have smote me right then and there. I would have been like, this is ridiculous. You have no clue you're saying. Smite. Smote. I had to look up the word that smote is right. I learned. But man, what a faithful God that we have. That we as impatient, unruly children go up to God and make demands all the time, and yet he still loves us perfectly. And so surrender is letting go of demands. It's taking everything out of our own control and trusting God with it. When you surrender, the worry of the questions that you have, the fears of tomorrow, they are no longer your burden. They're not in your control anymore. And so those worries, they don't go away, like they don't magically disappear, like everything's solved, but they're no longer on you. You need to trust God with the things he says he's going to do. Those questions, like, will my marriage make it? Will my kids follow Jesus? Will the diagnosis get worse? Will I ever get married? Will we ever have enough? Will God actually do what he promised? They're not yours to fix anymore. And they never were, as to be clear. But you were saying, God, I trust you in the answers. I trust you in the outcome. Even if it's further down the timeline that I really want. If I have to wait longer in the waiting room that I really want to be in there. Because surrender is not shifting blame to God and saying, well, if my marriage fails, like that's God's fault now. Like that's not what we're saying here at all. It's correcting the authority of the order of authority in our lives. It's saying, I'm going to submit and trust in God's plan and his will, and then I'm going to fall underneath that. When God is Adonai Yahweh, everything else falls into place. We don't get to dictate the outcome. We don't get to say, okay, God, here's what I need you to do this by. But we get to take that time that we spent struggling and trying to control everything in our lives, and we just spend it looking and watching God do amazing and perfect work. We just see the perfect creator and author, the supreme authority, do what he said he was going to do. Which is going to lead to our second point here, which is belief. Abram surrendered control. He knew that the heir would come from God and only from God's doing, but he does not get to decide when. He doesn't schedule it. He doesn't have a deadline. God is in control. He surrendered. And we see that in Abram. We see that he lets go. But he never lets go of the belief that God's going to do it. He never lets go of the belief that God is capable of anything. As Abram gets older, and it feels like God has to do a more miraculous thing here, Abram never lets go of the belief in the promise that he received from God. I'm not letting go. I'm not saying I'm like letting go and surrendering and I'm going to believe because I just don't want responsibility anymore. I'm surrendered because I know that responsibility is going to be perfectly upheld when it's in God's hands. And so that verse, that question in verse 2, what good is anything else if I'm still waiting on the promise, is an amazing demonstration of faith. Because verse 1, it's not outright a test, but it would 100% be a test for me. Verse 1, he says, do not be afraid, Abram, for I'll protect you and your reward will be great. That consolation prize of wealth and security sounds amazing. There's so many times where I've asked for those exact things from God. But Abram's belief, his surrendered life and then his belief leads him to look at the promise, not the prize. And that's why his belief is counted as righteous, because he was fully set. He was fully in. He fully believed in what God said he was going to do, not what God was going to offer him in the moment. He believed in the future promises of God. So a life of belief, of faith or faithfulness, it is different than any other life. You recognize it when you see it. Because a life that is set in correct order, a life that is surrendered, a life that is full of belief and trust in God, they look and they see God move more often. The way they talk about God is not the same way that other people talk about God. Their relationship is personal. They have the authorities and the priorities in their life set up. God is Adonai Yahweh to them. And so everything else seems to fall into place. Not that their life is perfect, but that their trust and the stress of the world is in the correct hands. And they're going to live a life that's directed by the supreme director, supreme authority and author. It's a totally different and amazing, incredible life. And we're going to see a lot of these lives in this Fear Not series. And so as I wrap up, I want to leave with a question. What is your fear about tomorrow? What is your fear about tomorrow? What is that question that just dominates your heart? The question that keeps you up at night, the question that you stress over, the question that you throw all your money at, the question you throw all your time at and your attention to. What fear do you have about tomorrow? And the question I want to follow up with is, whose hands is it currently in? Is your fear about tomorrow in your hands where you're still trying to control it, or is it in God's? And if it's in your own hands, how can you let go? How can you surrender? What does it look like to submit to the authority of God? What does it mean for you to not forget the situation and say it doesn't exist anymore, la, 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 la. But say, man, I know that God's going to do amazing things, so I'm going to trust him with it. That I'm not going to let this worry control my life. That I'm not going to say, God, you can have everything else, you can have my whole heart except for this one situation because I need this to work out. Or a situation where you go, God, the buzzer is about to be, like, does that happen? Like, I need you to step in right now, God. But to trust his timing. To let go of the fear and anxiety of what tomorrow brings, what it does or does not deliver. And if you've already surrendered it, what does it look like to maintain belief in what God's going to do? How do you endure the agony of the waiting room? I cannot imagine being Abram and Sarah. I cannot imagine having years and years of a known promise not coming to fruition yet. Of knowing God is going to do something amazing that we've wanted our entire lives, and I don't know when. And it's years and years of waiting on this. It's an amazing faith. It's an amazing life of faithfulness that he has. So when God steps into the situation and he says, fear not, do not be afraid. Don't look at the situation. Look and trust in God. When we fear God more than we fear tomorrow, we are living a faithful life. And so I'm about to wrap up here and pray. But as I do, I want to acknowledge the fact that we're going to have prayer team come forward. And fears are scary. That's how it works. And that fear of tomorrow, the question, that fear that you have, the thing that you can't let go of, the thing you've given to God and you really have to trust him with. Sometimes it's really scary to do scary things alone. When I was scared of like walking and like locking up the church building at night, I would call my wife and go, hey, just talk to me. I just need someone to be around me. I just need to hear her voice. It is so scary sometimes to approach God alone. It's so scary to approach a situation alone, and we don't have to do it. And so if you need someone to pray with you, someone to bring that fear up to God, or to say, God, we're waiting and we just want to know where we are in the timeline. Like, we know that you're going to be good, you know you're going to deliver, but we're waiting expectantly. Then that's what they're here for. Like, it would be a huge miss to not have a moment where you say, God, this thing is controlling my life, and I'm just going to walk out the doors thinking I still can control it. You said, fear not, and I'm going to walk out fearful still. A faith-filled life is looking at God and trusting him over any situation. And those situations are overwhelming. They control our hearts. They control our situation. They control our timeline. They control everything about us. And say, I'm surrendering it all. It's a huge, huge burden. But man, it's a huge relief when you actually do it with God. Because he will deliver. God will do what he says he's going to do. Abram does have many sons. He does have a nation through him. His descendants do outnumber the stars. God is faithful to his word. We just have to step and trust in faith. So I'm going to pray. You can come forward if you need someone to pray with, or you're free to go. God, you are good. God, you are good in spite of having a timeline, God, that does not match our own. God, you are good in the fact that we want to control, God, and you are actually wanting to control. God, you're good in spite of a time and a situation happening the way we don't want it to work out. God, I pray for every fear of tomorrow that's in this room. God, I pray for every burden. Pray for every situation. God, I pray for the hearts and the lives that are just entangled with fear and worry. God, I pray that you are a source of comfort, a refuge from the storm, God, a refuge from the anxiety and burden of life. God, I pray that we trust you. God, I pray that we live a life that is different and honors you. God, puts you as Adonai Yahweh. God, because you are there no matter what. You are going to be Adonai Yahweh. God, I pray that we recognize it and put you on the throne of our hearts. God, I pray that we look different. God, I pray that this church looks different. I pray that Savannah looks different, not as a result of just the fact that we live different, God, but because you do amazing things. And we trust you, God, and we see the things happen. So, God, I pray that we go from here not living in fear, God, but living in amazing and wonderful trust and submission to you. I pray this in your name. Amen. Thank you all so much.